The box they gave Gerald was gold and heavy. The envelope they gave me was thin enough to see light through. It was Father's Day in Naperville. June's sun bouncing off the White Eagle Club's windows, linen tablecloths breathing under the air conditioning, and my daughter Maya smiling like a hostess at a charity gala. She kissed her father-in-law's cheek and handed him an $8,112 Caribbean cruise package with drink passes clipped by a brass paperclip. She slid my envelope across with 2 fingers like a receipt she wanted me to throw away. A $5 lottery scratcher. "Something fun," she said, her voice a little too bright. "Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from." Gerald lifted his cruise brochure so the embossed ship caught the light. "Balcony cabin?" he said, tapping the sea view photo, eyes moving past me. I rubbed the corner of my ticket, heard the silent piano behind the bar, and put the thing into my shirt pocket because I didn't trust my face. We hugged in that awkward pretzel you do when the person you love is standing next to the person who taught them to rank people by price. By the time dessert hit, some flourless chocolate slab drizzled within an inch of its life. I knew she'd chosen her audience for the day, and it wasn't me. I scratched the ticket in the truck, windows cracked so the paper dust could float. Out. First row, 7 seconds, 7 third, 7. "Cute," I muttered and flipped it over to read the back. "Check at claim center." $50. Maybe 100 if the Lord had a sense of humor. I drove home, past trimmed lawns and flags, nodding like ushers. My garage still smells like motor oil and my wife's cedar chest. I put the ticket under a magnet on the fridge, right beside her recipe card for cornbread, and tried not to read it like a note from the past. June 21st. A Wednesday. The claim center smelled like old carpet and coffee burnt an hour ago. The clerk took my ticket, ran it through a machine that whirred like a patient trying not to cough, then looked at me as if I'd handed her a small animal. "One moment," she said, and waved a manager over. The manager's smile tried to be casual and failed. A printer started, the kind that chews on legal-size paper like it's steak. Words formed that don't fit inside a normal life. $120 million. Lump sum available. Taxes explained in a voice that floats. A temporary claim receipt slid across. I signed my name like I was borrowing it. I walked out with an envelope that didn't look like it should change anything and sat in my truck until the glass fogged a little. My thumbs typed, "Emergency coffee, no cops, no cousins," to Leon, my CPA. He replied in 6 dots, then 2 o'clock, back booth, no receipts left behind. I tucked the temporary claim slip behind my driver's license and looked at my hands. They've built decks and held my wife's wrist in a hospital room. Today they shook. That night Maya texted a photo of Gerald's boarding passes. "Isn't he the cutest?" I answered with a thumbs up and a period. In the quiet, I pulled a yellow legal pad from my workshop drawer and wrote 3 words at the top: assets, witnesses, dates. Beneath that, my wife's name, the loops of her Ys like little ropes tying me to the right side of the river. I turned the page and wrote a plan I hadn't said out loud yet. I would tell no one. I would hire a lawyer first, and I would pretend, for a while, to be exactly as broke as a $5 joke. The quiet in my house didn't feel like rest. It felt like a vacuum where respect used to be. The morning after the claim slip, June 22nd, a Thursday, I sat at the kitchen table with the blinds pulled to a squint and counted my coffee rings like tree age. 1 for the years we scraped. 1 for the years we thought we'd made it. 1 for the years I've been alone. The temporary claim receipt lay face down under a chipped salt shaker. I kept flipping it, like the numbers might evaporate if I looked away too long. $120,000 lump sum option noted in a font that belongs in magazines, not on my table with the nick in the edge from where Maya once learned to cut an apple. I'm not ashamed to say I cried. Not for the money, God knows I've fixed a deck in sleet for less than a tank of gas, but because my daughter had handed me love disguised as a joke. $5 of fun to carry me through Father's Day, while the man across the table unwrapped an $8,412 cruise and kissed the giver. That number sat on my tongue like a coin. 8,412, more than I cleared one winter laying out conduit for a developer who forgot to pay until I stood in his lobby with a thermos and the city inspector on my phone. At 10:15 a.m., I drove to Prairie Lake Cemetery with a $2.99 begonia from the grocery store. The cashier asked if I wanted a card. I said no. I brushed mulch away from my wife's name with my thumb and told her about the ticket. "You always liked a bargain," I said, and that's when I laughed. Too sharp, too loud for the quiet. Field. I set the begonia at the base of her stone and promised I'd do this right by the math we believed in. Work, thanks, and no money in the mouth that says, please. By noon I was in a glass room at First Midwest, Naperville branch, with Claudia the bank manager and a pen heavy enough to anchor a boat. She checked my ID like it was all that tethered the world to sense, then clicked the door lock behind us and slid a printout across. Effective tax rates, choices between annuity and lump sum, estimated net after state and federal. On the lump sum, she said gently, tapping a line, your net conservatively lands around 68.4 million. She folded her hands. Do you have anyone you trust to sit in the room with you for the next steps? I thought of Leon's habit of keeping receipts in a manila folder until the string tie wore white, of Ms. Patel's steady voice at a church fundraiser where she told a woman exactly how to title her condo so her son couldn't take it. I nodded, but my mouth said, not yet. Claudia set up a temporary holding account. No transfers without my wet signature, dual verification on every wire, voice password added. Stonebridge, the street we brought our daughter home to. She printed a deposit slip stub for when the funds would arrive and put it in a little clear sleeve, as if it were delicate. You'll get calls, she warned. People smell weather. I told her I'd keep the umbrella closed. Back home, the house breathed the way old houses do. Settling sounds, the faint hum of the fridge, the tick from the vent that always clicks in humidity. I opened the recipe tin, the one with my wife's handwriting on splattered cards, and found Thanksgiving cornbread. She had underlined buttermilk twice. I slid the card in front of the claim receipt. One was dinner, the other a storm. I took out a yellow legal pad and started listing the assets I could remember without opening a single drawer. House assessed $418,000 last spring. Truck worth maybe $12,500 on a good day. Tools that would fetch a heartbreak on Craigslist. Checking. At 7-800 this morning, I wrote witnesses and put down Stan, my neighbor who notices everything, Claudia, Leon, and a blank for an attorney I hadn't hired yet. I wrote keys and locks and circled it. The house would need rekeying. The safe deposit box had one key in my drawer and the duplicate in the envelope with the insurance policies. I wrote P.O. Box and underlined it twice. My phone buzzed Instagram. Maya had posted a countdown sticker for Gerald's cruise. He deserves to relax, the caption read, with a champagne emoji. In the comments, Evan had written, experiences over stuff. I set the phone down, walked into the garage, and stood where the cedar chest used to sit, back when the smell of it drowned out the smell of oil. My wife used to put her sewing there, and a little notebook where she tracked every dime we saved. When I brought home scrap copper, every receipt is a thank you, she'd say, sliding one into the pocket of her purse. I took a scrap piece of pine and penciled a line at 42 inches, the height of the counter where she rolled out dough. That line is still there from when we built this kitchen. My hands fit better on wood than on the idea of millions. At 4:30 p.m., I met Leon at a diner off Route 59, the kind with laminated menus that wipe clean. He slid into the back booth like a man stepping into a lifeboat. No cops, no cousins, he said, and took out a small, battered ledger. I showed, Him the temporary claim receipt tucked behind my license. He read it twice, then put it back like it might bruise. "We don't tell anyone," he said, "not even the cat." We sketched a short list on a napkin. 1. Hire an estate attorney. 2. Decide lump sum versus annuity. We circled lump sum. 3. Set up a trust with conditions. 4. Rekey the house and log keys. 5. Open a P.O. box for all sensitive mail. 6. Separate storage for originals and copies. 7. Draft a list of witnesses who aren't family. Leon wrote Patel Law at the top. I nodded. We split the check and I underlined the date on the $28.14 receipt before sliding it into my wallet. If I was going to rebuild respect, I'd do it with proof, not speeches. That night I tried to call Maya and didn't. I put the phone down and instead wrote her name on my legal pad under Grace and Boundaries because I wanted both. The plan wasn't revenge. It was a ledger returning to balance. The last thing I did before bed was take a voice recorder out of a desk drawer, put in a fresh SD card, and set it on the nightstand. Not because I planned to ambush anyone, because when people tell you who they are, it helps to be able to play it back to yourself later, slowly without the noise. Tomorrow I'd call Ms. Patel. Tonight I'd sleep in a house that finally felt like it had doors I could lock, and a future I could account for. If they wanted to manage me, I'd let them try, on my terms, at my pace. June 24th, a Saturday morning thick with humidity, I walked into Patel Law with a folder that held nothing but my wife's cornbread card and the temporary claim slip. Ms. Patel, sharp eyes, calm voice, navy blazer, gestured me into a conference room where Leon was already sitting, stirring a paper cup of coffee, like he was afraid the spoon might scream. She clicked her pen. "Let's list everything you own, everything you owe, everything you want protected." We filled a whiteboard that stretched the length of the wall. House assessed at $418,000, truck $2,500, tools checking $7,800, safe deposit box contents. Catalogued from memory, and the incoming lump sum, estimated $68.4 million after taxes. She drew 3 circles: you, successor trustee, beneficiaries. Then she wrote conditions in letters tall enough to see from the hall. "You control the trust while you're alive," she said. "After death, the successor trustee executes your instructions." Leon tapped the table, "And we can build." "In behavioral conditions, gratitude tests." Ms. Patel raised an eyebrow. "Gratitude tests." Leon nodded. "Simple, humble tasks that measure character. No headlines, no Instagram." We designed 3 of them for September. Test 1. Pick up the church pantry list and deliver $300 of groceries with no branding, no photos. Test 2. Help Stan fix his rickety fence. 2 hours, no shortcuts, no hiring someone else. Test 3. Bring a handwritten memory of my wife to Sunday supper. No printing quotes off the internet, no last-minute excuses. "These aren't traps," Ms. Patel said. "They're windows." "They're scales," I whispered, "to weigh what matters." She drafted a letter of instruction for Thanksgiving, sealed, notarized, to be opened only when I told them to. It outlined the structure of the Livingston Family Trust, a main fund, then conditional sub-trusts for family members, every one of them, starting at $1 until conditions were genuinely met. My wife's maiden name would anchor a caregivers and teachers fund, seeded with $500,000 once the trust funded. A neighbor's first microgrant fund would receive $2 million in staggered disbursements, Claudia called while we were reviewing clauses. "Your holding account is ready," she said. "To signature. Verification on transfers. Your voice password is active." And I've added a note: no account changes allowed based on third-party recommendations. That last part, carefully phrased for Evan. After the meeting, I drove straight to Ace Hardware and bought a new lock set. On July 2nd, I rekeyed every exterior door, logging each new key with a permanent marker: K1 front, K2 side, K3 garage. Stan came over with lemonade and signed the little witness line Leon had printed on my notepad. Keys reissued. Witnessed July 2nd. I tucked the spare set into an envelope and placed it in the safe deposit box the next morning at 9:13 a.m. I remember the time because the vault always smells faintly of old paper and cold metal, and it makes moments feel ceremonial. That week I opened a P.O. box downtown, a tiny brass door with the number 147, and forwarded anything trust-related there. I bought a cheap flip phone, the kind that snaps open like a secret. It would be my clean line. The main phone would remain exactly as they knew it, predictable, reachable, vulnerable on purpose. On a Wednesday night, garage lights humming, I taped a manila envelope under my workbench. Inside, the voice recorder, fresh SD cards, a list of questions I might ask at the Thanksgiving table, and photocopies of the 3 tests. My wife's recipe card sat on top, the ink smudged where her finger once pressed flour and handwriting together. At 8:12 p.m., I texted Maya from my regular phone. Thinking we could do a simple Sunday supper next month. Your mom's cornbread. 3 dots. Then, busy, but maybe. A minute later, a message from Evan. Heard you had a good ticket. Want me to run payout options? I typed slowly. All set with Leon, thanks. His reply came fast. We should at least talk strategy. I didn't answer. I closed the garage, turned off the lights, and stood in the doorway listening to the house breathe. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning clarity, a chance for them to show me something real without knowing it counted. The kind of truth you can't fake, not even for millions. Tomorrow I'd send the first small ask. The tests would begin. True wealth is time. The first test asked for exactly 2 hours. September 3rd landed on a Saturday, warm enough for gnats to hover over the fence line between my yard and Stan's. Before breakfast, I sent Maya a text from my regular phone. Stan's fence fell in last night's storm. Can you and Evan spare? 2 hours Saturday, 2 to 4 p.m. She read it, no reply. At noon, I sent a follow-up. I'll bring lemonade. Still nothing. Stan and I set out the tools anyway. My old Milwaukee drill, 2 replacement boards, a level, and the box of screws that still had the 14999 label on it. At 2:45, gravel crunched under tires. Evan stepped out in gym shorts, sunglasses, and that confident grin brokers wear like armor. Hey, Dad, he said, a name he uses only when he wants something. We can hire someone for this. You're back, you know. I gestured to the boards. 2 hours, that's all. He sighed the way a man sighs when a meeting goes long. Let me get a quick pic for the foundation page. He held a hammer near the post, snapped a selfie, tapped twice on his screen and said, We'll send someone Monday. He left at 3:01 p.m. Exactly 16 minutes of presence, 0 minutes of work. Stan signed the witness sheet Leon had drafted. Date, time, description. Guess that's strike 1, Stan murmured. Test 2 went out on September 10th, the church pantry list from St. Rita's, totaling 298.72. Please deliver before 5 p.m., I texted. And no photos, they don't like branding. At 5:27, I got a text from the pantry volunteer. Your kids dropped groceries, but everything's tagged from the Evan and Maya Foundation. We removed the ribbons. She attached a photo of the donor sheet with their names written larger, then the itemized list. Strike 2. I logged the time, took the receipt from the volunteer and slid it into a plastic sleeve in the trust journal next to Stan's fence witness form. Each page was numbered. Each piece of evidence went behind its tab. Groceries, fence, supper. Paper doesn't lie, even when people do. Test 3, September 17th, was the one that mattered to me. Maya had known my wife like a second heartbeat. She'd grown up in her laughter, so I invited them to Sunday supper. Just stew, cornbread, and the rule, bring a handwritten memory of your mother. Not typed, not printed, not quoted. Handwritten. They arrived late, 4:18 p.m., breathless and bright from some brunch downtown. Evan handed me a printed Pinterest quote. "A mother is your first friend, your best friend, your forever friend." Maya said she wrote something in the car, but when I checked the seat after dinner, all I found was a crumpled parking ticket, time-stamped 4:07 p.m., the exact minute she claimed she'd been writing. I held the ticket under the kitchen. Light. Not a word of her handwriting. Not a second of real memory. That was the moment something inside me stopped wobbling. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being measured. After they left, I sat at my table and recorded a memory of my wife on my phone. The night we had $42 between us and still tipped the waitress $5 because she looked like she'd had a long day. "Kindness is a receipt," my wife whispered that night. I wrote that in my journal and numbered the page. At 8:30 p.m., I emailed Ms. Patel, "Tests complete. All failed." She replied within minutes. "We proceed to conditional clauses. Attached were drafts of the subtrust language. $1 ceremonial bequest unless conditions met, service documentation required, boundaries respected." The legal steel was being forged. In the garage, I spread out everything on the workbench: fence selfie printout, pantry sheet, parking ticket, church volunteer text screenshots. These would become exhibits at my Thanksgiving table. The courtroom. Without a judge. I slid them into manila envelopes, labeled each with their initials, and tucked them into a storage bin under the bench. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. The truth was lining up, one page at a time. Tomorrow, I'd begin planning the holiday table, down to the last chair. When people think you're weak, they try to steer the pen while you're signing. By October, the air in Naperville had that crisp bite that makes leaves sound like paper under shoes. It was the kind of month my wife used to love. Hoodies, stew, noisy geese overhead. But inside my house, tension moved quieter than any bird. On October 8th, a Sunday morning, Evan called me out of the blue. "We should move your house title into a revocable trust I manage," he said, his voice smooth as the brochure he later emailed me. "If the market shifts, you could lose hundreds of thousands. I can safeguard it." He spoke like a man offering charity to a street magician. Attached was a quitclaim deed with blanks. My name half-filled, his typed neatly where a successor trustee should never be, and a glossy brochure promising asset optimization for seniors. Seniors. That one tasted bitter. I forwarded everything to Ms. Patel. She responded with a redlined PDF showing every manipulative clause, then drafted a cease and desist letter citing unauthorized legal preparation and solicitation. "Do not sign anything," she wrote. "Document every attempt." I printed her letter on my old inkjet, the kind that leaves lines when it's low on toner. Evidence comes in all textures. Maya texted that same afternoon. "Gerald got upgraded to the chef's table on his cruise. You'd hate it, though, too. Fussy." I stared at the message. My wife used to say, "Fussy is what people call effort when they don't want to show it." On October 12th, I walked into First Midwest and asked Claudia to add another layer to the no third-party advice flag. She typed notes into my file, then had me record a voice password, the rasp of her keyboard mixing with the hum of the vault door down the hall. "Say a phrase you won't forget," she said. I whispered, "Stonebridge cornbread, the street, where we raised Maya and the dish that held our family together." Later that week, Stan came by with a box of screws and a grin. "Got your note," he said. In the evening chill, he installed a discreet doorbell camera that pinged my phone every time someone approached. "Not because you're paranoid," he said, "because people get creative around money." We positioned it so it caught faces clear but didn't intrude on the porch's old charm. On October 22nd, Evan tried again. This time, he attempted to open a joint investment account for Dad's convenience. Claudia flagged it immediately and called me. "He used your full name and birth date," she said. Said you asked him to expedite. I gave her permission to shut it down and log the attempt. She emailed the incident report to Ms. Patel, who added it to the growing file. That night, I invited Evan to my workshop to talk. The room smelled of sawdust and cold metal. Beneath a newspaper on my bench, the voice recorder blinked its small red light. Evan leaned on my drill press, crossing his arms. "Old money can sit in the wrong hands," he said. "I'm just trying to keep the family afloat." I sliced an apple and handed him a piece. "Funny thing," I said, "this family's floated just fine without spreadsheets." He left when dessert didn't turn into a signature. After he walked out, I emptied the recorder and saved the audio onto my old iPhone, then to the cloud. One copy stayed on the SD card, sealed in a plastic sleeve inside the trust journal. Continuity matters. Copies matter. The next morning, I took out my stack of manila envelopes, the Thanksgiving place cards. Each would contain a curated exhibit. The pantry donor sheet with their branding, a still image of Evan's fence selfie, the cruise invoice for $8,412, a duplicate of my wife's recipe card, and a single dollar bill, crisp, symbolically insulting. On each dollar, I wrote in tiny letters with a fine tip pen, "Everything that matters costs time. Everything else costs $1. I left one chair empty on the seating chart, draped with my wife's faded apron, pale yellow with a stitched blue border. It would sit at the head of the table, a placeholder for memory, a reminder for everyone. By the end of October, the invitations were ready, printed on heavy cardstock, with the serving time listed in bold. Thanksgiving dinner, 2 p.m. sharp. No estate talk mentioned, no hints. Just the date, the menu, and my wife's cornbread in elegant script. The stage wasn't set yet, but the lights were warming, and the oven timer, the actual one, dinged softly behind me, like the house itself was counting down. They wanted a stage. I gave them lights, napkins, and a microphone. The week before Thanksgiving, when the air in Naperville smelled like chimney smoke and cold earth, Maya started a family group chat titled Estate Discussion at Dad's. She posted, "Let's all be supportive. He gets overwhelmed." Overwhelmed, as if my brain were a flickering bulb someone needed to tap. Evan chimed in, "I'll bring talking points." Talking points. I almost laughed. He'd been preparing for a takeover, and he thought I didn't see it. On Monday, November 20th, Claudia couriered a sealed banker's envelope to my P.O. box. Deposit confirmation enclosed. List of beneficiary. Account numbers blank. The envelope was thick, weighty, the kind that shifts a room. I locked it in my desk, signed the mail log, and placed a sticky note on top. To be opened only after they open theirs. On Wednesday, I invited Leon and Ms. Patel to Thanksgiving, not as guests, not as a firing squad, but as old friends from church. They both understood exactly what that meant. They'd sit quietly near the kitchen doorway, witnessing, documenting, saying nothing unless called on. Legal eyes behind polite smiles. Thanksgiving Day arrived cold and bright. I set the table at Indbrant p.m., just the way my wife used to. Real china, linen napkins, the old silverware we got at the flea market for 45 baht 20 years ago. And at the head of the table sat her empty chair, draped with her soft yellow apron. I pressed the fabric between my fingers before stepping back. "Open a chair for Grace," her recipe card had said. Today, that chair was the loudest voice in the room. I placed the manila envelopes at each setting, names written in black ink, each sealed. Their weight was quiet, but heavy with intention. At 1:58 p.m., gravel crunched. Maya walked in first, cheeks pink from cold, followed by Evan in a blazer that looked more expensive than his manners. Gerald came last, smelling faintly of cologne and sea salt body spray, already talking about his upcoming cruise itinerary. "Dad," Maya said, hugging me quickly, eyes scanning the table like a realtor evaluating staging. "This looks nostalgic." I gestured to the empty chair. "Always. Room for one more." We sat, Grace was short, spoken quietly, and when I finished, I told a story about my wife making cornbread for Thanksgiving the year Maya got sick with the flu in 7th grade. She said, "Food heals what medicine doesn't reach," I said. Gerald dabbed his eyes, soft-hearted in a way I'd never disliked. 5 minutes into the meal, the performance began. Evan cleared his throat. "We've put together a proposal," he said, reaching into his leather binder. "A consolidation plan. So your assets—" He paused, giving the word dramatic weight. "Are safeguarded. We can streamline your accounts, update your title, assign me temporary POA." I lifted my hand, not sharply, just enough. "Before any proposals," I said, "open your envelopes." He blinked. Maya blinked. Gerald blinked. The room leaned inward. Evan tore his open first. Out slid the fence selfie, printed in glossy color. The St. Rita's donor sheet with Evan and Maya Foundation written like a billboard. And my small handwritten note. I asked for 2 hours, not a photo shoot. He stared at the items as if they'd rearranged themselves. Maya opened hers. Out fell the cruise invoice for $8,412, a snapshot of Gerald's balcony stateroom, and the parking ticket from September 17th. Time-stamped to the exact minute she claimed she'd been writing a memory of Mom in the car, her face drained of color. "Dad, this feels hostile." "It's documented," I said, "just like you prefer." Gerald opened his next. Inside, a copy of the cruise packet he'd bragged about, along with a blank note card and a single dollar bill. "Everything that matters costs time," the note read. "Everything else costs $1. Silence fell so heavy you could hear the oven cooling. Tick, tick, tick. Then I reached for the digital recorder hidden near the salt shaker and pressed play. The small speaker crackled, and Evan's own voice filled the room. "Old money can. Sit in the wrong hands." The fork in his hand froze mid-air. "Today," I said, "isn't an estate division. It's a character audit. And the trust already executed." Their heads snapped toward me. Gerald swallowed hard. Maya's jaw trembled. Evan turned pale. I pulled out the final envelope, the thick one, sealed with a blue sticker, and set it in the center of the table. "This," I said, "is the Thanksgiving letter." I slid it open, unfolded the pages, and prepared to read. Not their inheritance, but their reflection. Let's begin. Justice can taste like cornbread, warm, undeniable, and a little dry at first bite. The moment the recording of Evan's voice ended, old money can sit in the wrong hands. Silence wrapped around the dining room so tight it felt like the air itself was bracing. My wife's empty chair watched everything with stitched patience, her apron folded like a witness statement. I unfolded the Thanksgiving letter, cream paper, embossed header from Patel Law, my signature at the bottom dated November 10th. My voice stayed steady, not angry. I wasn't here to punish, I was here to define. I watched from the parking lot for a long minute before driving away. Some truths you observe from a distance so they can grow without your shadow. Evan came less often. Pride kept him away, or maybe fear of the bar complaint draft Ms. Patel still held, but on the Sundays he did show. He carried the bags in silence, no photos, no posturing. He didn't say a word to me, but silence sometimes says, "I'm trying." One evening after supper, Maya stayed to wash dishes. She didn't ask. She just moved toward the sink and said, "Mom used to hum when she cleaned up. I can't remember the tune." She scrubbed the roasting pan, my wife's old one, the one with the dent in the corner from being dropped in 2007, and didn't look at me until the water ran clear. She hummed different tunes, I said, mostly whatever the radio was playing. Sometimes hymns, sometimes nothing but the rhythm of the sponge. Maya nodded, eyes shining. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I wanted to impress the world. I should have been trying to honor you." I didn't answer. Not yet. Some apologies you let simmer. The empty chair, my wife's chair, wasn't empty anymore. It was a space that invited honesty. It made people quieter, softer, more human. Even Evan one night paused at that chair and ran his fingers along the apron string. January slipped forward. I drove to Prairie Lake Cemetery with another $2.99 begonia, the pot almost freezing to my glove. I dusted snow off my wife's stone and told her the truth. Your cornbread test worked. I stood there until my toes buzzed from cold. And then I laughed at the absurdity of it all, how a cruise meant for someone else, and a $5 ticket meant as a joke ended up rewriting our entire family. Justice didn't make us perfect, but it made us accountable. Sunlight hit the begonia just right, glowing like a small ember in the winter grey. I tucked my hands into my coat pockets and walked back to my truck. The 6-month clock was ticking towards spring. The final condition would be read soon, at a table without microphones, envelopes, or theatrics, just people, truth, and whatever rises warm out of the oven. The hardest signatures are the ones you won't forge, like, "I'm sorry." By March, Naperville had thawed just enough that the snowbanks shrank into lumpy grey ghosts along the curbs. I'd gotten used to a new rhythm, quieter Sundays, receipts filed by intention instead of defense, and the sense that the trust, more than the money, was changing the weather inside my family. It was the second Sunday in March when Maya knocked on my door instead of texting. She stood there with a folded letter in her hand and a nervous determination on her face. No makeup, no pretenses. Just my daughter. The version I remembered from years ago, before curated perfection swallowed her whole. "Can we talk?" she asked. We sat at the kitchen table. She smoothed the letter flat with trembling fingers. "I failed the first tests," she said quietly. "Not because I didn't love you, because I wanted applause, from everyone but you." She passed me the letter. Her handwriting filled the page, large looping strokes, some smudged like she'd started over more than once. It was a memory. A real one. She wrote about spring break 2004, when her bus from the university broke down at a station in Joliet. I'd driven 6 hours round trip after a 10-hour shift. She remembered the way I brought her a thermos of my wife's leftover stew. She remembered how I never once complained. "That's the mum I lost," she whispered. "That's the dad I forgot." I folded the letter carefully, because care is its own language, and tucked it into the trust journal between pages 71 and 72. Later that week, Ms. Patel forwarded me a digital copy of an email from Evan, short, respectful, almost painfully. So he wrote, "I acknowledge the cease and desist. I withdraw all financial proposals. I'd like a chance to reset my conditions." Ms. Patel asked if I wanted to allow it. I thought about his fence selfie, his branding ribbons, the quitclaim deed he'd slipped toward me like a magic trick he thought I wouldn't see through. Then I thought about accountability, true accountability. "Reset from April West," I told. Same rules, no shortcuts. One failure restarts the clock." She drafted the notice. Evan signed it electronically. His signature looked smaller than usual. Claudia helped me set up view-only access to the scholarship dashboard, so Maya could see the names of the teachers and caregivers being supported, but not touch a cent. When I told her, she cried into her sleeve and asked if she could start volunteering at the school's Saturday reading program. On Easter Sunday, I set the table again. No envelopes, no evidence, no tests, just dinner. Maya arrived early and asked if she could help make the cornbread. Her hands shook when she touched her mom's mixing bowl. I lifted my wife's apron from the empty chair and folded it, placing it gently in a drawer. The chair stayed, but not as an absence, as a guest seat again, a seat for return, not grief. After dinner, I carried a fresh pan of cornbread across the street to Mrs. Hanley, who had slipped a sympathy card under my door after my wife passed. I left it on her porch with no note. The house felt gentler that night, In my desk drawer, the final letter sat waiting, sealed, addressed, stamped. It explained what would happen if they completed all conditions, and what would happen if they didn't. I didn't know which future was coming, but I finally believed I could accept either one. The last lesson fit inside a birthday card with a scratcher of its own. My birthday landed on a mild May morning. Naperville between seasons. Tulips still holding on, air warm enough for a light jacket. I'd planned nothing special. Maybe coffee on the porch, maybe a walk past the park, where my wife used to drag me to those summer craft fairs. But at 9:12 a.m., there was a knock. When I opened the door, Maya was standing there with a small white envelope, no gift bag, no curated bow, no performative smile. Behind her, Evan waited with his hands in his pockets, quiet, almost humble. "Happy birthday, Dad," Maya said, and her voice didn't have that brittle brightness she used to coat everything with. It was soft, real. I stepped aside and they came in. The house smelled like coffee and old wood, the way I like it. The kitchen table was clean, no trust journal out, no documents spread like armor. Just 3 mugs and the sunlight coming in through the window. She handed me the envelope. Inside was a plain handwritten card, the ink slightly uneven, as if she'd stopped often to think, and tucked behind it a $5 scratcher. But it wasn't the scratcher that got me. It was the photo clipped to it, a picture of the brass pantry freezer key on her keyring, the one she'd used every Sunday since Thanksgiving. "We figured it out," she said. "You don't want our money talk. You want our time." My throat tightened. I scraped the scratcher with my thumb. $5, just $5. And for the first time since the original ticket, I laughed. Really laughed. Maya laughed with me, full, unguarded, the way she used to when her mother burned cookies and blamed the oven. "Sit," I told them. They did. Evan held himself carefully, like a man trying not to step on a boundary he finally understood was real. I reached into the drawer, pulled out a notarized trust amendment, and slid it across the table. "Because you met your conditions," I said. "Your subtrust activates today." Maya's eyes widened as she read the number. $250,000, restricted strictly for a down payment on a home in her name alone. No co-signers, no investors, no advisors managing the funds. If anyone tried to attach themselves to it, the clause dissolved. "This is—" She covered her mouth. "Dad, I don't deserve—" "You earned it," I said. "The hard way." Her shoulders shook. I wasn't done. I turned to Evan, sliding a thinner envelope toward him. "Yours," I said, "remains at $1 until October." He nodded. No arguments, no explanations, just a man accepting the ledger he helped write. A small step, but a step. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. A text from Gerald. A selfie at the Veterans Hall serving chili with a crooked hairnet. "Started my 6 months," he wrote. I smiled. People change when they decide to, not when you force them. I mailed him a $500 travel credit to visit an old Army friend by train. Not a carrot, just acknowledgement. That evening I drove past St. Rita's. The pantry lights glowed warm, and as I slowed, I saw Maya pull up, grocery bags in hand, unbranded, quiet. She unlocked the freezer with that same brass key, the metal, blinking softly in the still air. No cameras, no hashtags, no applause, just service. Just being the daughter her mother raised. I don't know what tomorrow's interest rates will be. I don't know who will stumble or who will rise. But I do know this. My table is set. My rules are written. My door is unlocked. If you come with clean hands, you didn't lose me. You priced me. And I finally chose to pay myself in peace. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're listening at night, set your thermostat the way you like it. No one else gets a vote. "This letter," I said, "explains exactly how the Livingston Family Trust is structured. It was executed weeks ago, and it includes each of you." Gerald shifted in his seat. Evan's fingers tapped an anxious rhythm against his blazer. Maya stared at the apron, jaw clenched. I cleared my throat and read, "The Livingston Family Trust consists of 3 pillars. First, the Caregivers and Teachers Fund in my wife's maiden name, seeded with $500,000. Second, the Neighbors First micro-grant program, funded quarterly for those in need. Third, the family conditional subtrusts, each starting at $1 until specific conditions are met." I paused. Let them feel the weight of that number. $1, the price of their behavior so far. Evan leaned forward. "This is, Dad, come on. You're emotional. We can restructure all this with proper guidance." "Your guidance?" I asked. "Like the quitclaim deed with my name half filled and your name typed clean and ready?" His cheeks flushed, but he didn't deny it. I continued reading. "To qualify for disbursement beyond the initial $1, each beneficiary must meet 3 conditions over a 6-month period. Condition 1, perform 1 unpublicized act of service per month, documented by a signed witness, not photographed, not branded. Condition 2, bring 1 handwritten memory of my wife to a Sunday supper each month. Condition 3, respect financial boundaries. No unsolicited legal or investment documents. No attempts to access or direct my accounts." Gerald rubbed his temples. I didn't ask for any of this." "I know," I said gently, "but you benefited from the atmosphere of it." I reached into the banker's envelope and pulled out the deposit confirmation. The paper felt heavy, like a culmination. "There. I said is 400,000 in the trust as of November 15th. Gerald inhaled sharply. Maya's hand flew to her mouth, and Evan finally understood the scale of the universe he'd been trying to orbit. "You told me you won a little something," Maya whispered. "I did," I said. "A little something, compared to the way you treated me." I set the document down and slid a printed travel voucher toward Gerald. "This," I said, "is the credit for your $8,412 cruise. I reassigned it to a Gold Star Widow's cruise this winter. If you complete the same conditions as the rest of the family, you can join as a guest of honor." Gerald blinked. I don't know what to say." "Then don't," I said. "Just act." Next, I pulled out a slim envelope labeled E. Inside was Ms. Patel's cease and desist letter and copies of the attempted joint account paperwork. I slid it across the table. "This," I said, "is the legal response to your efforts to manage my finances. You'll find a bar complaint. Draft attached." Evan's eyes widened. "You're threatening me?" "No. The law is instructing you." Finally, I turned to Maya. Her envelope had 2 things: my wife's apron, freshly washed, folded with care, and a simple brass key. She swallowed. "What's this a key to?" "Not my house," I said. "The church pantry freezer. Every Sunday at 2 p.m. there will be a list in the lockbox. Complete it quietly. No photos, no tagging, no foundation, just help." Her shoulders shook. "Dad, you set us up." "No," I said. "I set a table, and I invited you to show me who you are." For a moment her eyes softened. Then shame hardened them again. Stan, who had been invited as a quiet witness, cleared his throat from the kitchen doorway. He'd been leaning there unnoticed, hat in hand. He stepped forward, nodded to me, and placed a signed witness sheet, the one documenting the fence test, at the center of the table. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. I lifted the final page of the Thanksgiving letter and read, "These conditions are not punishments. They are opportunities. You decide whether you inherit money or you inherit my respect." Maya's breath caught. Evan stared at the tablecloth as if it held escape instructions. Gerald looked at the apron. I let the silence linger until it rooted. Then I said, "Dinner's getting cold. Eat." We ate in heavy quiet. Only the muffled clinks of forks, the faint hum of the furnace, the tick of the cooling oven. Halfway through, Maya whispered, "I didn't realize we hurt you." I looked at her. "Then this is your chance to unhurt me." After dessert, I handed each of them a copy of the instructions and invited them to take their envelopes home. Monday. Morning, I said. Certified letters go out. By December 5th, everything will be filed in the county and the bank, and the 6-month clock begins. As they gathered their coats, my wife's apron glowed softly in the low dining room light. For once, the empty chair didn't feel like grief. It felt like accountability, and when the door closed behind them, I let out a breath I'd been holding since Father's Day. My house felt whole again, not because of money, but because truth finally sat at the table. Monday would begin the legal part. Tonight was for cornbread and peace. Paper beats talk. Filed paper beats every speech. The Monday after Thanksgiving, November 27th, the air in Naperville held that grey chill that makes everything feel like wet concrete. I woke early, 5:42 a.m., made coffee, and laid out the documents on my kitchen table the same way my wife used to lay out puzzle pieces, edges first, then the middle. Certified letters for Maya, Evan, Gerald, copies for Ms. Patel, notices for the county, instructions for Claudia at the bank. Justice isn't loud. It's printed, stamped, and walked to the mailbox on steady feet. By November 29th, Ms. Patel filed the Livingston Family Trust Memorandum with the DuPage County Recorder. It wasn't the full trust, just enough to make it real in the eyes of the law, the kind of filing that prevents future, well, he didn't really mean arguments. Claudia activated the 2-key protocol on my accounts. No beneficiary changes without in-person verification from both of us. A banker's equivalent of a steel door. She emailed me a confirmation, writing, "You made the right decision. People behave differently around commas in bank balances." She was right. Leon opened the Caregivers and Teachers Fund with the initial $500,000 seed, already earning interest. He sent the first invitations to my wife's old school. Teachers she'd loved, teachers she'd argued with, teachers who had once sent home glitter-covered construction paper with Maya's name crooked. At the top, they were asked to nominate someone who needed help by December 15th. No publicity, no plaques, just receipts and relief. Meanwhile, I delivered the first neighbor's first micro-grant, $3,200 for a furnace repair for a single mom on Bailey Road. The invoice was tucked in her screen door with a handwritten note from a neighbor. "No need to thank me." She never knew my name. The repairman's receipt went straight into my trust journal, page 47. Then the fallout began. On December 1st, Evan sent a long email titled, "A Path Toward Reconciliation." In it, he suggested collaboration, offered estate efficiency plans, and tried, in corporate speak, to position himself as co-steward of family assets. Ms. Patel responded with one attachment, the bar complaint draft documenting his unauthorized legal attempts, joint account application, and pressure tactics. Her message was short. "Consider your next steps carefully." He went silent for the rest of the week. Maya, though, she surprised me. On the first Sunday after Thanksgiving, she showed up at 2:37 p.m., late, with branded grocery bags. Stan stood on the porch, arms crossed. "No photos," he reminded her. She flushed, nodded, and handed over the bags. The pantry volunteer later texted me. She asked if she could help stock shelves, quietly. The following Sunday she arrived, on time, carrying plain brown bags, no logos. Inside was a folded handwritten note. "Mum taught me how to braid my hair by practicing on her apron strings." I stood in the pantry aisle and cried where no one could see. Even Gerald called midweek, not about cruises this time, but asking for the condition list again. "I want to earn my place," he said softly, "not take it." On December 5th, the final administrative filings cleared, monthly school gifts scheduled, micro-grants queued, and a house safety reserve established. The trust machinery quietly hummed to life, clean, lawful, unstoppable. That night I set the empty chair again. I placed my wife's recipe card under her apron, and for the first time in months, I ate cornbread without bitterness. Justice didn't roar. It arrived notarized, time-stamped, and balanced to the penny. And now the 6-month clock had begun. Money doesn't change blood, it reveals its oxygen level. By January, Naperville had settled into that deep winter stillness where sound gets swallowed by cold air. My house wasn't empty. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that means you finally stopped waiting for someone to knock only when they want something. Most days began the same way. Coffee, trust journal open to a fresh page, pen ready. Not for accounting. The millions. I had Claudia and Leon for that, but for accounting the life around me. I wrote down every act of goodness I saw, every boundary respected, every receipt that proved compassion still existed. On January 4th, I funded a $200 furnace, repair for a bus driver whose wife was in chemo. The technician left the yellow carbon copy and I slid it into page 53 of the journal. On January 9th, I quietly donated $400 to St. Rita's for winter coats. Maya's handwriting flickered in my mind, how she used to curl her Ys like her mother. Every Sunday at 2 p.m., the pantry key on Maya's ring clinked like a small promise. The first Sunday of the new year, she came alone. No makeup, no curated smile, no foundation-branded grocery bags. Just her and 2 sacks of food. "Do you need help stocking shelves today?" she asked the volunteer. The woman nodded and pointed her toward the freezer. Maya rolled up her sleeves.